like in Hebrew you say derech haglayim, like by your feet. Like you have to experience it yourself. You have to push yourself to your limits and understand that like there's more that you can do. You don't have to succumb to the stress, pressure, whatever's in front of you at the moment.
Nuri Golan, thank you so much for joining me on 20-Minute Leaders. How are you today?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm doing great. I'm very jealous of you. You get to meet Shuli and Gil on an ongoing basis, and I miss them so much ever since I came back to Israel for the COVID times. So please send them my love and my regards. But enough about them. Nuri, such a fascinating journey that you've taken. Perhaps one of the most fascinating pieces of it is right in the beginning as a captain in the Israeli Navy SEALs, turning into running R&D for that same unit, and then the boring stuff, selling a company and creating another startup, sitting on advisory boards. But that's the boring stuff. Let's go back to the beginning. Nuri, how do you get to be a combat officer in the Navy SEALs?
Lots of reasons for wanting to do that, but most importantly, I grew up in a very Zionist family. A lot of my uncles and my dad all served in the Israeli military. So when I was a teenager, I started to think about it, and then I actually was in Israel during the Second Lebanon War in 2006, and it was a really interesting experience being there. As I think I was 19 at the time, and everyone your age is kind of out at war, and so being there and having a good time in Tel Aviv, but not seeing anybody your age really has an impact on you. And someone who always kind of thought about wanting to serve and do something a little bit bigger than me. That was the kind of the straw that broke the camel's back, and I decided I wanted to join the Israeli military. So I finished my degree. So I was studying at George Washington University at the time, Aerospace Engineering.
Oh, wow.
So I spent another 2 years completing my degree, and then in 2008 I got in a plane with my cousin, and the two of us made Aliyah and joined. And then I thought I was only going to go for 2 years and then come back to the U.S. But I got accepted.
And you end up at 9.
Yeah, I got accepted to the Navy SEAL entry exam, and on my way there, somebody told me, this is at least 5-year service, and I said I didn't know that, but okay. And once I passed, and they admitted me and invited me to start training, I just couldn't give up the opportunity.
Nuri, I have to say that, I'm sure that a lot of my friends in Israel who are going to be listening to this are already getting frustrated because, it's known how insanely difficult it is to get accepted to the Navy SEALs. The Gibush is one of the most notorious, difficult experiences that any, young 18 or 17-year-old can go through. And getting accepted there is remarkable. And I'm sure that it's quite a big shock also coming from university studying aerospace engineering and landing all of a sudden in this 5-6 year program where you're literally, drinking seawater and eating sand. Talk to me a little bit about this experience of going from George Washington University straight into the Navy SEALs.
Well, it's definitely a shock. There were many moments where I stood there. I think during the 5-day entry exam, the Gibush, at one point, it was like there was a lightning storm out, and they were making us run in and out of the water. And I was holding this giant metal anchor, and they told me to go throw it in the water so that we could go run around it in circles. And I'm looking up at the sky, thinking I'm about to get hit by lightning carrying this giant thing. I'm what the hell am I doing here? How did I get here? But at the time, again, I was 21 at the time. I was locked in, focused. This is what I wanted to do. And so, that kind of takes over any of the critical thinking parts of your brain, and you just kind of run with it. It's definitely a challenge. For me, at least, some of the most challenging parts weren't necessarily the physical pieces, but dealing with, having officers and commanders who were younger than me, who didn't really have a ton of life experience. It was really funny. I had a degree, again, I wasn't exactly the most mature and sophisticated person in the world, but I had a engineering degree, and people are looking at me oh, I'm only going to start my college in like 5 or 6 years after I finish the military, go travel for 2 years, take a year off. So that for me was one of the most difficult parts. The physical stuff.
So just for context, I wanna move forward on your journey just so that we can get the context as to the type of person you are. But then I really want to circle back and go back to these extraordinary lessons that one can learn in the company. Because the truth be told, most of Israelis in the tech scene, especially those that are in Silicon Valley, they're not coming from these elite combat units. A lot of them are coming from 8200, 81, all those elite technological units. And so I'm extremely excited to hear your perspective on the different leadership lessons. But walk me through some of the different experiences you had, like with EXO that was acquired by Lear, and then sitting on advisory boards in your most recent startup.
Are you asking about those experiences specifically, or?
Yeah, give me the rundown of what happened since you left, just so that we can get the context.
So I finished my service, and I always startup world and entrepreneurship was something that was always interesting to me. And I ended up doing my MBA at the Technion, which had a startup and innovation program.
Casual.
Yeah. And so that kind of is where everything started. They basically tell you you should start a company and use this as like an incubator to build your idea out. And so I was lucky enough to meet a couple partners, one of which was the guy who led the GPS squadron in the U.S. Air Force. So wow. He had some ideas about how to improve the accuracy of GPS. Obviously, that was like, okay, this could be a very big deal. And so we started a company around it. And yeah, like the lessons and the training that you get in the military, in my opinion, are some of the best that an entrepreneur can get. Like, you're right. When I go around in Silicon Valley pitching to VCs, they ask me, oh, were you in 8200? Were you in 81? Where, they already know those buzzwords. And I was like, right. Oh, no, I was in 13. And they're like, what's that? I'm like, the opposite end of the spectrum. But I think that, you're used to working, the training that you do, you're used to working under serious time constraints, never knowing what the next minute is going to be, let alone the next week or month. Intense conditions, everything's up and down, and you have to learn to keep yourself kind of really level-headed. And so I think the best entrepreneur lessons I ever learned were in the training that I got in the military. And I think that helped me, through EXO, where we're trying to sell a deep tech company or a deep technology product to the automotive industry, which was at the time, and still a very difficult industry to sell into, especially for startups. You have a lot of highs and lows, and being able to manage that is one of the most critical parts of running an early stage startup.
Right. So you've done that. You've done that once. You're doing it again now at Sosivio. What is Sosivio?
So Sosivio is a autonomous cloud native platform. So it helps you manage it's like a next generation observability tool for managing your online and cloud native services. And so we help any company of any size, generally some of the larger companies that are moving into the cloud more and more so, keep their applications running and keeping their environments optimized.
So it sounds like it definitely sounds like something that's necessary to do. But what is the problem? Because from most people's perspective, we look at all the big tech companies that we have today. Obviously, they're running in the cloud, and obviously every startup is starting out in the cloud. I think people quickly forget that the majority of the world is not in the cloud. I don't know exactly what percentage. Maybe you can enlighten me. But I still believe that a lot of the big core enterprises that we've seen, that we've rolled in from the 20th century, have yet to make that transition. Am I right?
Well, yeah, I mean, cloud is just also one of those terms that you don't know exactly what you mean. Cloud, a lot of people today, they think that means you're running on AWS or Google or Azure, but really anything where you're running an application not on your own computer is cloud technically, right? Like you're running something somewhere else. And to do that, you have to use a ton of different softwares and services and tools to help keep it running smoothly. And so observability is one piece of that world, which is just helping keep your services up and running. Everyone's had the experience where they're using an application, it could be a banking app on your phone, and it just crashes on you. Why did that happen? It's not why does it happen only once out of 100 times? Well, there could be a number of circumstances in how the environment is operating where, in that one moment when enough people are using it, the system crashes. And so what we do is we're able to figure out much earlier, before those failures materialize, what's going on and whether or not something's going to happen. So we predict it ahead of time and help you make sure it doesn't affect your customer's experience.
Wow. And where are you at with that journey right now? So I know that you're a part of Upwest Labs, a phenomenal group. But what's been the journey like for Sosivio?
Yeah, I mean, the company was started earlier this year, and me and one of my co-founders from EXO, and then named Adam, and then Avi and Liran are the other two co-founders. Started it up. We raised a little bit of money. We're out raising money again right now, which is always a fun process. And starting to build it out. We have a core product that's being released, and we're working with a number of partners already. So it's a very exciting time. This is
And what's been the the biggest learning experience or the learning curve that you had to adapt to as you're transitioning? Because it is very different from everything else you've done, right? I understand coming from a military background, when we still have to talk about the leadership experiences that you've gained there. But I understand the technical background you've gained there, the GPS, deep technology, military application makes a lot of sense. And now you're moving on to helping big enterprises make a transition towards the cloud world with predictive analysis on when things might go wrong. It doesn't connect in my mind. Help me work this out.
I mean, you don't always have to be the industry expert yourself to run a successful business or startup. I think that, there's a lot of other factors. You talked about like leadership, right? Like having someone who can just steer the ship in the right way and know how to build the company in the right way and bring in the right people and the right experience and right talent. That's critically important. And so this is a brand new space for me, which is a challenge. And it's actually a challenge that I embraced. I was excited about trying something new and not just staying in the same field for the rest of my life. For me, like what I want to do is I want to continuously build companies and learn. One of the coolest things about doing this is that you get to learn a whole new space, and you get to learn a whole new world of technology, a whole new world of people. And that to me is exciting. So it's not that there's a direct connection between GPS and cloud services. It's more that the recipe for building a good startup is pretty much the same no matter what industry you're in.
And it sounds to me like a key ingredient all the way from studying aerospace in George Washington's to going to the Navy SEALs to running R&D in the Navy SEALs to selling a GPS company to now doing this is curiosity. I mean, it sounds like you're just passionate about whatever you're doing. You're embracing that challenge. You mentioned before when you were just doing that gibush that you're sort of trained your mind to stop that critical thinking and to embrace the challenge and to run head first. And it sounds like there's a lot of parallelism to what you experienced going into perhaps one of the most difficult units in the IDF and one of the most prestigious units to running a startup. Am I right?
Yeah, I mean, I'm a pretty analytical person. I like to sit down and think through problems, but there comes a time where you need to just run through a wall. And I think that's like one of the things that going through, the Israeli Navy SEALs really helps you. Like you can think about every aspect of a problem and you can have a perfect strategy. Occasionally you're just going to come up against an obstacle and you need to get through it in whatever way possible. And I think that's a piece that, it's not something you can teach someone or tell someone. They can only learn it on their own. Like in Hebrew, you say derech haglaim, like by your feet. Like you have to experience it yourself. You have to push yourself to your limits and understand that like there's more that you can do. You don't have to succumb to the stress, pressure, whatever's in front of you at the moment.
Right. No, that makes a lot of sense. I'm thinking back to some experiences I had. I came from 8200. I wish I came from like an experience like the Navy SEALs. Unfortunately, I probably couldn't get in even if I applied. But I remember that a lot of the times we had these struggles and we had to develop these technologies and we just didn't have the funds to do them. And we said, okay, well, we need this server, we need this technology, and we need this type of person. And I would go to my commander and he would say, okay, no, and unfortunately no. So good luck. You still have a week to get it done. Right. And so at that point you're saying, okay, there's a wall and you just have to break it. What's leadership like in the Navy SEALs? What is it like being a combat leader?
Well, by the way, being a combat leader and being like a startup leader are two very different things. And I would actually argue that being a startup leader or in the business world can actually be more difficult in a lot of ways. Being a combat leader, like in the military, you have a rank, you have authority. Like there's some things that are given from the beginning that make it a little bit easier. Where in the business world, especially in the Israeli business world, you have to earn your place because people will challenge you all the time. And so, at the end of the day, like in the military, yes, you'll have the rank and you'll have the position, but you need to own up to it. Like you need to protect your people. You need to be, lead by example. If I had to boil it all down to like one point, it would be lead by example. Like if you preach to people a certain thing, you don't hold yourself to the same standards, you'll be toast in no time because the people won't respect you. So for me, that was like the guiding light always was whatever I ask my teams to do or my people to do, I better make sure that I hold myself to that exact same standard. And if you do, there's really never going to be complaints from the people below you. Because if you're doing it, then why shouldn't they, right? If you're the higher rank, if you're the person who should have the better benefits, better things, like they have no reason to complain.
Right, and I think one of the very special things also about these different amazing units in the IDF is that a lot of the times the commanders are the ones who are doing the heavy lifting early on. Especially I know in my unit, and I'm sure also in the Navy SEALs, that the people that are promoted that are commanding and they're leading the teams are people that were perhaps the best soldiers and the best at both mentally and physically and emotionally. So I'm definitely sure that. What about tackling? It's a different type of challenge. When you take a team that is tired, that is beaten down, and now you have to take that metal bar and run into the sea and throw it. It's a very different task than guiding somebody to work late, to deploy a new version or fix a bug. It must be very different.
Yeah, I mean, of course. Look, it's one of the good. We talked about the differences between business leadership and combat leadership. In the military, one of the advantages is that everybody has a very clear common mission, which is another very important aspect of leadership. It's like
right.
You hear this in a business all the time about like, what is your, what's the business's mission statement and what are you about? And like that is an attempt to, solidify a group around a common cause. In the military, you have that built in. It's like, okay, we all know what we're here for. We're here, especially in Israel, right? We're here to make sure that the country survives to next year. So, it's about making everybody understand that that's what they're there for. The risk and the circumstances are obviously a lot more significant in a combat role, and so that helps in some ways too, because you become a lot closer to the people you're around, like the brotherhood that you build and the fraternity of the teams that you work with. Even to this day, like I obviously have a lot of good friends who weren't in the military, but friends who did serve, especially friends who served, on the front lines, doesn't matter if they were special forces or not. There's a different kind of like connection there. Again, that's no disrespect to anyone who didn't serve in those roles, but there's something there that you just can't recreate in the outside world, and even in the business world, like it's very difficult to do that.
100%. My father was a pilot, I guess maybe 40 years ago in the Air Force, and not a week goes by where he doesn't mention an amazing friend that he had in the course, as if they did a program together last week. And you can feel the bond that people are creating, this lifelong partnership, which is it's just phenomenal. You had a short stint in venture capital, something that not a lot of entrepreneurs get in as young as you are. So how was that? Was it fun? Was it enlightening? Did you benefit from that towards the next startup?
Yeah, absolutely. It was, first of all, I think as of most of like the venture capitalists usually come from an entrepreneurial role of some kind. So like, I think that's incredibly important to have been on the other side, to see what the startup is like. You look at things a lot differently on that side than when you're on the entrepreneur side. You really like, you can see when a startup is maybe, extending the truth a little bit, or, things pop out at you that maybe they didn't before. We're like, okay, I'm sure that these guys are having this problem, and just by the way that they're speaking about it.
Right.
So it's invaluable experience. And then now back on the entrepreneur side, it's also very, very valuable, because now, like when you go to pitch a VC, you know what they're looking for, how busy they are, how like sometimes their attention spans can just be completely too short to really listen to you. So you know kind of where to harp in and where to focus, and it's certainly like incredible. I recommend that both sides do both roles. I think it'll just be more productive for everyone. When I was doing that role at Lear, I felt from the entrepreneurs as well that they appreciated it as well, like having, especially in corporate venture capital, because that's typically where you don't get like entrepreneurs. Right. In like a VC, again, like I was saying, usually they have some entrepreneurial experience. In a corporate venture capital world, not a lot of them have their own entrepreneurial experience. So it was
because they're coming in from internally within the organization.
Yeah, like I was kind of an out, and I didn't stay. I was only at Lear for 2.5 years, but a lot of entrepreneurs who are acquired either move, they stay in the operations role of running that business, or eventually they phase out. I grew the team within Lear of EXO, and then eventually joined and helped launch the innovation organization and took over the venture capital part. But that was unique, or definitely not the norm, I would say.
Wow. Nuri, I want to thank you for being so generous with your time. Really, really wonderful. Before we go, I have to ask you for the most important question, which is 3 words that you would use to describe yourself. I'm particularly curious to hear what you have to say because of your extraordinary experience.
I would say competitive is number 1. Most people who do I have to explain them or just give you the words?
If you can explain in a short sentence, I would love that.
Yeah, most people who know me know that I'm extremely competitive about everything, and then I joke, including about who's more competitive. So that's one.
We're gonna save this competition for the next episode because we have a competition going on here.
Yeah, disciplined, I'd say number 2, where again, like especially in entrepreneurship and obviously in the military, like being disciplined to yourself, not just the outside world, like holding yourself to standards. Like even when you tell people a certain thing, like, hey, you got to wake up at this time, you got to do this, this, and this. A lot of times people aren't going to be there to see you or do it. And it's, still important to hold yourself to those same standards, because, it's not about actually doing those things. It's about the mentality of like, here's what we're going to do.
Right.
Stick to it. And then 3, I would say dedicated. Is something else that drives me a lot. Is when I get into something, I'm in it, fully. So that's I guess number 3.
Nuri, I knew you wouldn't disappoint with those 3 words. Nuri, toda rabba, thank you very, very much. By the way, I think that those 3 words didn't come up in any of the other 250 episodes, and it's because this was a very special episode. It's one that's very dear to my heart, because as I traverse along my journey, especially in Palo Alto, sometimes it's not easy to explain the experience of being in an organization like the IDF, and it's also different, I think, from a lot of other military experiences as well. I have friends who served in different militaries. This innovation through necessity, this discipline, this being, I remember when I enlisted, and the first week that I enlisted, I came as 19 straight from Palo Alto. I was doing a year there with Professor Danarielli. I had a 19-year-old girl who was screaming at me for forgetting to tie my shoes a certain way. And I remember that moment that it just dawned on me that, okay, this is a new reality and we're going to do some great things. And it was a fantastic experience. Nuri, thank you very much. It was a pleasure.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Take care.
Good luck.